I think we should go to the beginning just to be.
Go, sit in front. We are a family.
Good afternoon. Come on in and grab a seat.
Chad, lift that up a little bit.
Is that better?
Yep.
I have the esteemed honor of introducing our next speaker this afternoon. My name is Chad Brooks. I work for a labor organization called United Food and Commercial Workers Union. We are a national union that represents approximately 1.3 million members across the United States. Sorry about that. And those workers that we represent come from a variety of industries. One of those upcoming industries is the medical marijuana industry. We currently represent over 3,000 workers in that industry, primarily on the West Coast. We've done a lot of work out there in California, Colorado, Washington. We want to make those same inroads here on the East Coast as well. We're in Maine right now, we're in Massachusetts, and we want to kick off those inroads in the state of New Jersey as well. So what we thought was, what better opportunity but to come to the World Cannabis Expo and introduce to you our warrior, the guy that is on the front lines of every fight that's been happening out on the West Coast and the East Coast. The gentleman that's just kind of made this happen. He's worked tirelessly with other organizations and coalitions to change the landscape of the medical marijuana movement in this country. So I'd like to introduce to you the director of our Medical Cannabis Division, Dan Rush.
Thanks, Chad. Hi, I'm Dan Rush. Like Chad said, I'm the director of the Cannabis Workers Rising Campaign for the United Food and Commercial Workers International Union. We are a national campaign that is organizing medical cannabis and hemp workers across the country in Canada. A lot of people ask, why did the union get involved in medical cannabis and hemp? And I think the best way to answer that question is that our core industries are retail, agriculture, food processing, pharmacies, textiles, and alternative fuels. Those are our core industries. Those are the industries that we represent, those 1.3 million members. Meat cutting, poultry, agriculture, snack foods, distillery, we're the distillery union, pharmacies, pharmacists, pharmaceuticals. So I always respond with, we didn't get into the medical cannabis industry, you guys got into our core industries. And so that's what we've been doing, is helping the industry kind of understand the components of what we call an industry that is commercial production for human consumption and wear. And what that means is that we're an industry where cannabis and hemp are produced, cultivated, processed, produced, packaged, and dispensed. Those are our core industries, and so medical cannabis is too. Medical cannabis is something that is produced commercially, if done right, and consumed and worn by humans and by people. And textiles are something that we wear. These are labeled industries. And so when you have an industry that requires a label, especially an industry of vulnerability, and cannabis can create vulnerabilities in the community, in the consumers, which is our patients, and also, and most especially from our perspective, the workers. So how many people here working in the medical cannabis industry? Hopefully.
Not yet.
Okay, exactly my point. A lot of people here would like to be working in the industry. Some folks from other places I've been in the country are working in the industry. However, they're working under the radar. They're kind of, in many places, we're kind of in a gray area. We can't really come out and get licensed. We can't. We're a community of people that want to be workers, that want to be regulated. A lot of folks want to pay their fees. They want to pay their way in the industry. And this is the 21st century. You just can't be involved in commercial industries unless you have regulations and unless you're paying for yourself to be there. You wouldn't want a gas station to move in on the corner and operate there on the corner and not be regulated by, how they're spilling things in the ground or how they're, messing up traffic on the corner or, every industry in this 21st century is and needs to be regulated, including us. And that's what we have to do. We have to understand what many of us call nutrients, the rest of the world calls chemicals. I mean, the pesticides and other things, and I'm not even talking about just chemical, but I mean other potentially toxic elements that we use to commercially produce cannabis can be dangerous. You take the nutrients that we put on plants and you spray them on, and they're a nutrient that make the plant grow. But if you take a 55-gallon barrel of it and dump it in the ground, nothing will ever grow there again. We got to realize that our origins came from garages, back rooms, alleys, and so we didn't quite start off with the practices that other industries have already evolved to. And so that's some of the stuff that we kind of target and work on as a Medical Cannabis Industry Union, is not just wages, hours, and working conditions, although that's what we want to build an American-made, middle-class industry that has continuing education benefits and has health care benefits and adequate family health care coverage, pensions, and in the rest of the industries that UFCW is in, which is grocery and meat, and poultry and snacks and all that, our goal is always to create jobs that we call single earner jobs. And a single earner job is a job that one parent can support the household with health insurance and adequate wages and a pension, and the other parent is free to raise the family, or to go get a second income job, or whatever. But the point is that we want to create an industry that's sustainable and that lasts, and that all of us can go to work every day and not have to worry about the things that have historically oppressed us. There's a whole room full of people here that could be at work, but yet we've got a system, we've got a government system here in the state that thwarts our efforts of creating jobs. And who lives in a community that doesn't need a job today? I mean, we all do. And who lives in a community that isn't closing schools and closing hospitals and has horrible infrastructure and, not to make jokes, but I mean, we're all driving streets now that have potholes in them. And we have elements of our society that are attacking us because we give pensions and health care to firefighters and nurses and even police, who surprisingly do have a role they can play in our society that's positive if they do it right. So, when people say, well, why would I want to join a union? Maybe I am working in the industry, maybe I am making a few bucks, maybe I am kind of floating under the radar because I can't get a license and I can't apply for one, and my state won't open up the industry for licensing for me. The thing I tell folks is joining the union is not just about your wages and your hours and your working conditions. Although, trust me, we are targeting those things to create that American-made middle-class job. But we're also aware of how industries are constructed and how job descriptions are defined. And we see people working in places, and we have this affectionate term for people that work behind the counter, and we call them bud tenders. That's not the most dignified handle that there is in the world. But yet we allow ourselves to be disparaged, but then we jump up and say, well, we're workers and we want dignity. Well, a lot of the reasons why meat cutters and retail workers and snack food workers and other folks in other industries like ours that are commercial production, a lot of the reasons that they enjoy dignity and they enjoy sincerity from the community and security in their community is because their industries are defined, and they're defined in regulatory agencies. You know, we see a lot of folks just making stuff up as they go along, but they don't understand the origins of how similar jobs got their descriptions. Like we have meat cutters in grocery stores and head meat cutters, and we have clerks. And the reason that we have those is because the reason we have those titles and those job descriptions is not just because of the union agreement that defines them, but also in the regulatory agency that defines and regulates the industry. So, you know, we know how to work with regulatory agencies. We know how to work with communities. We know how to go to universities and develop matrices that develop definitions that can be turned into regulations. And once they're regulated, then we can also stand up and say, look, don't disparage me because I work in an industry you don't understand. Here's a piece of data that describes what I do. And here's a union contract that says that what I do is not only legitimate and compliant and legal, but it's also well thought out, regulated, and monitored. And so these are the things that we try to talk to legislators about and regulators. And frankly, does anybody remember Prop 19 in California? That was Prop 19 in 2010 was the first control, tax, and regulate cannabis initiative that there was since going back to the 1990s. And we got involved with Prop 19 because essentially at the end of the day it created jobs and it created tax revenues. We got our own tax projections from the state's Board of Equalization, which is kind of like the state IRS. And they actually predicted that a regulated and taxed cannabis industry in California would generate at a minimum $1.5 billion in the first year. We used the data, or we developed data that determined that there were 1 million cash cannabis transactions a day in California. And we're closing schools, we're closing fire departments, we're closing hospitals, we're laying off public workers, we're attacking their pensions. And yet, we have a system that people think, well, if cannabis is against the law, then it goes away. Well, it doesn't, and it didn't, because it is a good medicine. And so there we have a dysfunctional system that because of whatever fundamentalist fear or whatever ridiculousness, we're afraid to A, define, and then B, regulate and tax or fee, however you want to use that. A lot of people don't like the word taxes, but the reality is we all have to pay taxes. So there's 1 million transactions going on a day that could generate, if there was just, a few dollars from each transaction, generates hundreds of millions of dollars a month, generates billions of dollars a year. We see these publications that talk about the cannabis industry is a $1.97 billion industry. The fact of the matter is, in this country, cannabis is about a $55 billion a year industry. It is, without a doubt, the largest cash crop that there is, that we have. And that's just the cultivation side of it. Then you get into, we're all discovering now topicals and tinctures and edibles and processed foods and, other ways to apply medicine. And now we're finding out that some of the things we get attacked on is that we don't have labeling, we don't have a standardized process in how we get there. We don't even have job definitions. And yet we have electeds and bureaucrats that fight us at every corner. Why? We ask them why. Show me some data that says it's a good reason to fight us. And they whip out the old script from Reefer Madness. And they say, communities are going to come apart and people are going to go crazy. And, a governor in a big state out west says, well, I don't want a bunch of potheads for citizens. I need smart people. Yet this is a governor, who does whatever he does on the weekends. And so we have this, we have this great, smart, opportunity to raise revenues and to create a dignified industry. And then we look at patients, and we realize not only do we have an opportunity, but we also have a duty. We have a duty, not just as the industry, not just as caregivers, not just as patients, not just as communities, but all of us have a duty to make sure that this medicine is there for patients. We've been working a lot in Washington State, where we're watching the recreational industry, they call the 502 stores, are being regulated now. And yet the medical cannabis industry that's been up and running for 10, 12 years there now is under attack. Not only by the federal government, but also by the very regulators that are regulating recreational cannabis. And we see this attack going on, and it's like, you know, if we just took that energy that they're using to fight a medical cannabis industry and put that energy into science and data and testing and other scientifically driven processes to prove what cannabis does for patients, there would be so many more jobs, as well as a new recreational industry as well. I think we all know, I think we're all, smart enough to see that there's a wave going on in the country, and that the end of prohibition is on the way, and it's happening, and that movement, that momentum is growing every day. But one thing we can't let go of is the fact that we got cannabis to begin with because of the medical cannabis industry. And we can't let go of that industry. We can't just let it fall apart. On the other hand, we probably are wasting our time if we're fighting recreational. And UFCW's policies right now are around medical cannabis and shoring up medical cannabis. Someday we may take those policies and look more at recreational. But right now, and one of the reasons why New Jersey is such an important state is because you do have the law here. You do have the agency here. You do have the opportunity here. But yet we've got to get over these hurdles of political fundamentalism and other types of religious fundamentalism, economic fundamentalism, and we've got to get to the part where the state is spending its time regulating the industry and getting people up and running so that we can serve patients, and so that the industry and the workers are up and running and serving patients. And especially doing it in ways where we're not doing some of the older, less sophisticated, sometimes obnoxious practices that used to happen, like cultivating cannabis in our garages, or out in the backyard, or in the state park down the street. And I got to tell you, I'm one of the biggest cannabis activists I know. But if somebody moved in next door to my house and started cultivating 3,000 plants on an extension cord and a bunch of big strong lights, I may go over there and unplug those lights myself. I mean, that's the other thing we have to think of is we have to be good neighbors, and we have to think about the communities we're in, and we have to think about how we're perceived. A lot of us want to open a dispensary or open a cultivation facility, and yes, maybe we do grow the best weed, but maybe we aren't the best practitioners of cleaning up the messes that we make. And maybe we need to realize that we do have to pay for a system that helps us be good neighbors, and also helps us to define this industry and to make it grow. There's a lot of reasons why workers are joining the union, and even though those reasons are changing right now, the fact of the matter is we're still, as workers, very oppressed in this industry, in this reality, and we don't have to be. There's a lot of reasons why employers have found themselves accepting neutrality and saying, hey, you know what, maybe being union isn't that bad. Okay, we'll be neutral, come and talk to our workers, come and see if they want to join the union. And most of the time we know what the workers' topics are. We don't want to go to work a afraid, we don't want to go to work, wondering if we're going to get shut down, we don't want to go to work, trying to figure out how to do the best practices, even though we don't know them. And then there's also reasons why employers should be glad that we are unionizing. Apprenticeship programs. We designed the only apprenticeship program in the nation that's just about to be ready to be approved by the state of California. And forgive the pun, but a joint Medical Cannabis and Hemp apprenticeship program that's just been approved by the Department of Education in a school district called Hayward, in a community college school district in Hayward, California. And those are some of the requirements of having a certified apprenticeship program. When we have apprenticeship programs, also we can define the job jurisdictions, and then employers, it's easier for them to get insurance, health insurance, property insurance, all the insurances and duties that employers need to have safe and sound facilities. We start talking about using the word commercial, which when the state designs its program appropriately, we can use the word commercial, even though, many times in history, using the word commercial has gotten us attacked by U.S. attorneys or by other unfriendly, uneducated forces. So a lot of times going around the country, I've talked to employers who've said, sure, come talk to my workers, come see if they want to join the union. We're not afraid of developing this industry. We're learning how to come from the back room and into Front Street and putting a light on and having a transparent and illuminated process. A lot of us just want to go to work, and we want to be respected for the work we do. We want to make an adequate wage. We want health insurance so we can take our kids to the doctor, so we can take ourselves to the doctor. We want education opportunities. We want apprenticeship programs. And these are all things that take away all the arguments of the people that are against us. See, they can't say you're a bunch of screwy potheads and you don't know what you're doing if we're holding up an apprenticeship program that's approved by the state, that has definitions, that was based on a matrix that data was developed on to define the definition of cultivator and master cultivator and technician and social service representative is the person behind the counter. And see, when we start talking about ourselves with dignity, pretty soon what happens is we start doing dignified things. Not that we don't do it now. And then what happens is we are dignified, we are sincere, and when people throw ridiculous labels at us, like we're irresponsible or we're unstructured and we don't know what we're doing, well, it's very hard to argue with those documents. It's hard to say that a union is going to allow, our union especially, because we're known for taking care of for sticking up for our members and our workers in the workplace. It's very hard for fundamentalist crackpots, did I say that out loud, to attack us and call us insincere, or call us criminals, or call us anything other than the dignified people that are defined in the process that we're adhering to, and that we're using things like safety committees and education committees, and where we have forms on the desk when the patients check in that ask, what are your symptoms, and what types of medicine have you been trying, and have you tried this medicine? How often do you come here, and what's the dosage and the levels that you need, so that we can turn around and take that data, that real-time data, that experience-based data that comes from people that are in the process, rather than some movie script like Reefer Madness. It's very hard for them to be taken seriously when they attack us. And so these are the things that joining the union going to do for workers. And these are the reasons and the things that that we're going to do for a unionized industry, and especially for our employers. Don't look at us as unfriendly, and don't think that there's going to be 26 people sitting on a pallet telling you to go jump in the lake. You ever hear Bill joke about how many Teamsters does it take to change a light bulb? You know how many UFCW members it takes to change a light bulb? One. You know why? Because we're good workers. Because we work in an industry where if something needs to be done, somebody goes and does it. We're not a, you know, there are unions that have been around for a long time, for 150, 200 years, and they work in industries that are very defined like ours is, and very regulated, building trades industries, and other industries, sign and display, and transportation. And I got to tell you, those folks have been around for a long time, and they negotiate with employers that are reporting billions and billions in profits. And see, that's the difference. The folks in our industry, the workers are risking everything working there. The employers are probably the only ones not getting paid and have a mortgage or two this year that they didn't have last year. It wouldn't do us any good for us to come sign up your workers, or it wouldn't do us any good for you as a worker to come sign you up into the union and then show up at the job site and say, well, we're going to make it impossible to work here, we're going to shut everything down, we're going to put people out front with signs, and we're going to make sure that nothing happens here. But what ends up happening is we don't have any members anymore because our members were the workers of the place that got put out of business. Now, I guarantee you, in 60 years, my granddaughter will be pounding on the table, demanding more money and better benefits from your grandchildren. But right now, for the next 50 or 60 years, it's a process of let's build this industry. And let's get this industry to the point where there are billions in profits being made, or where there are billions in revenues for the not-for-profit, collective, and cooperative owners that choose to stay not-for-profit. And a good example is, look at Kaiser. Kaiser is still a non-profit, and they're also the largest healthcare provider in the world. And they're big, and they're huge, and they're good, and they're, I'm a Kaiser baby, and my kids are Kaiser babies, So, it is possible to remain not-for-profit in healthcare-driven industries, in herbaceuticals-driven industries. A lot of the origins of UFCW were ranches and farms and family ranches that exploded during World War I. Before they were raising a couple of hundred head of cattle and they were feeding people in the region. And then somebody from Congress showed up and said, here, we'll give you $1 million, go build a big giant meat plant over there so that we can send meat across overseas to the soldiers. And folks were like, but we're a little tiny family farm, but we'll take the $1 million and we'll go build the facility and we'll process your meat. But there was a lot of, yes, 5 minutes, thank you. Anyway, thank you, Joel. I want to point out Chad and Hugh and Joel and Mike Thompson's here,
He's behind the camera. He's right behind. He's right
and
behind.
Mike are from UFCW Local152, and they're here in your area. And my office is in DC, and I live in Oakland, but I travel the country, and I'm going to be looking forward to coming back and talking to you guys. Our goal is to organize the industry here in New Jersey. Our goal is to be a great representative for workers and to remove oppression and to bring equity and equality on the job for everybody. Our goal is not to put anybody out of business, but to bring the experience that we have in these industries to the industry, to our members, to their employers, to the communities. And we look forward to working with you. And please feel free to talk to any of us, and especially our guys back here. We'll be here all the time. Anybody got a question or two real quick? Yeah.
Yes, and I apologize, I came in a little bit before the very beginning, but are you trying to unionize the current medical industry in New Jersey? In other words, get people who have shops to join the union?
Exactly, and that's our goal. It's best for our work. In other words, we really can't do a lot of work unless we have members in the area. And so if people are currently working in the industry in a job employment scenario, please come talk to our guys.
Can I follow up on that and play devil's advocate with you for a little bit? You know, they say, you know, shade of gray, every silver lining is a shade of gray. What do you say would be, is there any price or any downside along with the many benefits that come from being in the union? What things can you foresee? Would they have difficulties in their towns or within their jurisdiction? Would the government give some shop owners a problem if they were not in agreement with the union?
So most of the state's industries are designed to have a state agency,
Okay.
which allows the state to have regulations. And then those state agencies usually, almost in every case, have to adhere to local zoning. So not only do you have to get a license from the state, but oftentimes you have to get a special use permit or another type of permit
Sure.
from a municipality like a county or a city.
Out of a school zone, for instance?
Out of a school zone. So when we go and approach with our license applications and say we want to do this here in this community, we have a theory of why we're at the location we're at, how it doesn't violate policies or laws or codes or zoning, why it makes best sense. And we have a process called the merits-based application system that we try to offer to state agencies and to municipalities. And of course, when you're a union employer, if what you're doing is going to create more union jobs for our members, like opening new facilities and being stable and secure in them when you get there, we're gonna help with that process. Just like grocery stores, they have to be zoned and they have to be licensed, and also with cannabis facilities, restaurants, gas stations, whatever. So yes, we're going to bring our experience in helping folks learn how to do that process, or help you with the experience you have with our experience. So hey.
So there's nothing I didn't love about what I've heard, from apprenticeships to being good neighbors to generating raw data. But here in Jersey, of course, things are still taking off. It's got a ways to go. But what are some concrete things that can be done? Like if you take the dispensary out in Montclair, it's like a ghost town in there. It's like no one even exists. They don't get back to you. The windows are blacked up. There's leaves from like 2 years ago in front of the door. The state's program is very limited. Hardly anyone can get access unless you're very sick. Other than that, short of that, quality of life is like non-existent. So what can be done concretely to move things forward? Because we have it, but it's not really the
So we have,
yet.
and thanks for that question, we have to go to local electeds. We have to go to bureaucrats and planning commissions and say, look, as long as you don't have a commercial facility here, you don't have the tax revenues, and you don't have the employment and job base for the community that you could have. See, sometimes we have to shame them into doing the right things. Sometimes we have to show them that what they're doing is backward and fundamentalist driven, and it doesn't make any sense. And so that's one of the goals we would have. First, we want to organize some workers in the existing industry here in New Jersey. Actually, not some. We want to organize everybody. The plot is true. We do want to take over the world. But we want to use that to build this great industry. So yeah, pointing out to communities. I got to tell you, when I first started working in this in 2009, it was 1 in 100 electeds and bureaucrats would even be willing to listen to what we had to say about the industry. And usually that was the one elected or bureaucrat that couldn't get anything done in their legislature or on their city council. They were the polarizer. They were the one everybody went, oh, there they go again, geez. Oh, now they got cannabis. Oh, geez. Now we're at about a 70% success rate of, and the polling reflects how we've gone around the country and educated electeds, and that's how it works. We educate electeds first on who and what we are. We're not you know, dude, I grow the best weed, dude. You know, you know, Raheem and Shanikra and Jane and Sally and Monique, and we're real people, and we have a real business plan, and we understand cannabis probably a little bit more in depth than even clinicians and scientists and doctors. I saw your hand just a second. So let us teach you, and as we teach those electives, that kind of translates into more acceptance when they hear it on the dais while they're meeting. And then that kind of translates back to the community of, oh, well, if our electives weren't crazy about it, well, maybe there's something, maybe we can listen to the topic without going out of our minds. Okay? Did you?
Yeah, I was just curious. As far as I know, we only have 2 dispensaries in New Jersey, 2 working ones.
That's what I understand.
So how many legal marijuana workers do we have, like, at the moment? You must kind of almost know.
In Jersey?
Yeah, like
Oh, maybe a few hundred.
a few hundred.
Maybe. I mean, if you take, so you got to look at the ancillary industries too. You got to look at packaging, hydro stores.
Okay.
You got to look at the patient identification systems, centers, and processes. You've got to look at transportation. There are some folks that, you know, laboratories. And see, that's the other thing is because these are our core industries. UFCW is the union for these industries. And so we have been organizing everything from the seed to the consumer, to the laboratory, to the cultivation facility, to the dispensary, to the cottage or commercial kitchen that is infusing food and other products, which we have to be very careful of because we don't want to be too attractive to kids. On the other hand, we want to be available to anybody who has Dravet syndrome or who has MS or who has rheumatoid arthritis or who is going through chemotherapy. I mean, we're seeing studies now come out of the University of Tel Aviv in Israel that are, that used to say tumor reduction. Well, now they've had 2 or 3 years to study it, and now some of those studies say tumor eradications for certain types of tumors, brain cancer, some types of breast cancer, some types of liver cancer. We're seeing where skin cancers, in the first year, when they were testing the topicals, they were showing, real evidence that the topicals were working. Now, 2 or 3 years later, we're seeing where symptoms have been eradicated, for a lot of different stuff. We see now where kids, a lot of types of kids with Dravet's, if given the appropriate types of CBDs and other, and I'm not a scientist and I don't claim to be, but I have to learn these topics to work regulatorily and legislatively. But we see certain elements in cannabis are taking kids with Dravet's from 300-400 seizures a week to 2 or 3 seizures a week. And so, but in the beginning, those studies said, well, there was a reduction. Now we're seeing, after long periods of time, that there's almost eradication of certain types of symptoms. And so we need to take this energy of, I'm the governor and I don't want to do it, you can't make me do it, or, I'm going to make you make me do it. We got to take that energy and turn it into, I'm the governor and I want to make sure that we are doing it and that we're doing everything we can do to make sure that the patients have what we need and that we're enabling this industry to evolve through its own research and development, and also through government-driven, university science, producing data that says this is why we're doing it. They got to partner with us, we got to partner with them. And but first, we have to get ourselves together. And so one of the things that I hope everybody realizes is UFCW, we're a big union. We are the largest private sector union in North America. We're not just a national union, we're an international union. And we know what we're doing when it comes to commercial production for human consumption and wear. And that's what we have to realize is we're not just cannabis. We are a commercial production product. And that makes us commercial production workers. And then we are, even though we have to use the word dispensing in many places, we are also retail workers. And those are UFCW's industries. We represent laboratory technicians at Kaiser, in other healthcare facilities. We also represent them in the cannabis industry. And yeah.
Not to take attention away from New Jersey, but I had a brief experience years back, a friend who opened a shop in California. Now that was right when it was still under Bush and it was state legal but not federal legal. I watched from when she owned a shop and everything was sketchy, and just like when you described about how you couldn't really advertise and everything was kind of lowbrow, to a situation where all of a sudden shop owners, as long as they're willing to invest and have their own growers, their own security, go within certain regulations, could now thrive in California. Did your organization have anything to do with the expansion of those dispensaries and how they could run business in California or any other states?
Let me tell you, there were very few commercial facilities, cultivation, production, dispensing, outside of Colorado when we got involved in this. There were some industry pioneers, Harborside, the pharmacy.
Around what year? Sorry.
We got involved in this Thanksgiving in 2009.
Okay.
And so yes, we've either worked directly on many of the states that have developed regulations. Well, California actually doesn't have regulations yet. We're working on that. Oregon, Washington State, Colorado, Massachusetts, Connecticut. Many of the states that have commercial industries, it was either our work directly or it was work that we had been involved in developing that influenced the commercial process or arriving at a commercial process in those other states. So it's not just because of us, but yes, we had a particular impact on helping the industry understand the difference between being a movement and being an industry. And then realizing that the movement and the industry have to stop cannibalizing each other. You know, that's what they call us in the political ballot industry, is the cannibal industry. And I don't see that so much here in New Jersey, but in other places, the movement and the industry, the movement being reform marijuana laws and the industry being people who make a living in medical cannabis or commercial cannabis. A lot of times we attack each other and we kill the good in lieu of the perfect. And that's the other thing we've got to realize, is good places to start. You, and then I got to go.
Okay. It may be jumping the gun, but how does the fees work? I mean, how do you charge?
So in unions with collective bargaining agreements with employers and workers that work in the industry, your workers join the union, and workers pay dues.
Right.
And I don't know exactly what the dues are out here. It's usually around $40 a month, give or take $10.
I used to be a postal worker.
Yeah, and that's per month, by the way, not per hour. Like, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, union's charging $50 an hour for dues. That's not right. It's, 40, around there.
Okay.
And no, employers cannot pay the dues for the workers. So what we do is we ask employers, don't penalize people for joining the union. Give them $1 a day raise to help pay for, what's going to be dues and other costs. But I'll tell you what, being in the union is sure a lot cheaper than paying $500,000 or $1 million a year to lawyers and consultants and other people who, are not dependent on feeding their family on whether or not this dispensary that I work in is open and up and running. And we have to realize that we're not just the plant. We're a three-dimensional topic: worker, patient, and community. And we have to move forward as that. And as we define ourselves and as we fall into these regulatory agencies and processes, we'll find dignity in that, because there is dignity in it. And nobody can say that we're undignified or that we're less than compliant. We can hold up paper. So you can say it all day long, but if you hold up a piece of paper that says, these are the conditions that I work under, and these are the folks that monitor it, from my union and from my employer and from the local regulatory agency, how can somebody dispute that? They can't. The only time they can is if they're lying. So look, I gotta run. I hope to see you guys
Thank you.
soon.
Thank you.